Stop everything you're doing right now, because what you're about to hear isn't speculation, it isn't theory, and it's definitely not the kind of geopolitical headline that disappears by morning. What unfolded over the last 48 hours has fundamentally altered the balance of power on this planet in a way that modern history has never seen before. This is not just another escalation, not another regional crisis, but a single, decisive event, so massive in scale and so permanent in its consequences that governments across the world are scrambling in emergency sessions, not to respond, but to understand what just happened. And the most disturbing part? There is no clear answer, no reassuring interpretation, no safe outcome hiding beneath the surface. Russia has transferred 1,000 RS-28 Sarmat nuclear missiles to Iran. Let that number settle in your mind for a moment. Not dozens, not a symbolic deployment, but 1,000 of the most destructive weapons humanity has ever created. Each missile carries the power to erase entire nations. Each travels faster than any defense system can realistically intercept, and each one is now positioned inside fortified Iranian facilities, aimed outward at a world that can no longer rely on the rules it once believed were permanent. The RS-28 Sarmat, known in NATO circles as Satan II, isn't just a weapon with a dramatic nickname. It is a system designed with a singular purpose: to ensure that no defense, no matter how advanced or expensive, can stop it. With a range of 18,000 kilometers, the ability to carry up to 15 independently targetable nuclear warheads, and the capability to approach from unexpected directions like the South Pole, it bypasses decades of carefully constructed early warning systems built by the United States and its allies. This isn't just an upgrade in military hardware, it's a complete redefinition of what defense even means. And now, Iran has 1,000 of them. To understand the scale of this shift, you need to move beyond the number itself and look at what it represents in real strategic terms. The United States, the most powerful military force on Earth, currently maintains around 1,500 deployed strategic nuclear warheads across all its systems combined. That includes land-based missiles, submarine launches, and bomber aircraft. Now compare that to what Iran has just received. 1,000 Sarmat missiles, each capable of carrying up to 15 warheads, means a potential delivery capacity of 15,000 nuclear warheads. That's not a marginal increase, not a regional advantage, but a force that surpasses the entire American nuclear arsenal by a factor of 10 in raw delivery capability. Within 6 hours of confirming this transfer, Israel responded with a statement so brief and controlled that its simplicity made it even more alarming. Iran has 48 hours to stand down or face total destruction. 11 words, delivered without emotion, but carrying the weight of a nation, staring directly into a future it may not survive. Behind those words lies an impossible calculation. Israel's nuclear arsenal, once sufficient to guarantee deterrence in the region, now faces a threat so overwhelmingly larger that traditional concepts like balance or parity no longer apply. At 3:14 inches the morning, Washington received confirmation of the transfer. The president was woken immediately, and within 20 minutes, the National Security Council was fully assembled. And for the first time since the Cuban Missile Crisis, the leadership of the most powerful country on Earth sat together in a room and realized something deeply unsettling. There was no option on the table that didn't carry a real risk of ending civilization as we know it. What you're about to explore goes far beyond headlines and official statements. This is a breakdown of how something of this magnitude could happen without intervention, what these weapons actually mean for modern defense systems, why Israel issued a 48-hour ultimatum, and whether that ultimatum is a genuine line in the sand or a signal of desperation from a government with no remaining good choices. We're also going to examine what it means when deterrence itself stops working, and what kind of world emerges when the most destructive technology ever created changes hands at this scale. There are no easy answers here, but there are three critical questions that define everything moving forward. First, how did Russia manage to execute the largest nuclear transfer in human history without triggering a Western response? And what does that reveal about the true limits of American intelligence power? Second, what makes the RS-28 Sarmat so uniquely dangerous, and is there any system on Earth capable of stopping it in real conditions? And third, with Israel's 48 6-hour countdown already in motion, and Washington facing a complete lack of clean military options. Is there any path forward that doesn't lead to nuclear conflict? And if such a path exists, who is actually capable of taking it? If you're here because you want analysis that goes deeper than surface-level reporting, sharper than official narratives, and more honest than what most mainstream outlets are willing to say, then this is the moment to commit. Subscribe, turn on notifications, share this with anyone who needs to understand what's unfolding, and add your own serious perspective in the comments. Because right now, this conversation matters more than ever. Now let's step into the first phase of this crisis. The part that should have been impossible, the transfer itself. Moving 1,000 nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missiles from Russia to Iran was not done through secret smuggling routes or hidden operations that intelligence agencies failed to notice. It was something far more bold and far more difficult to counter. This was a direct state-level decision, approved at the highest levels of Russian leadership, carried out through official military channels, and completed before the West could organize a response strong enough to stop it. To understand how this happened, you have to understand the strategic thinking behind it, because decisions of this scale are never impulsive. They are calculated, deliberate, and built over years. Vladimir Putin did not wake up one morning and decide to transfer these weapons. Every aspect of this move was planned, modeled, and evaluated as part of a long-term strategy that began years earlier, especially as tensions between Russia and the West escalated over Ukraine. Over the past 3 years, Moscow has come to see the existing global system, led by Washington, as something that no longer works in its favor. Economic sanctions, technology restrictions, military support to Ukraine, and diplomatic isolation all combined to create a pressure environment unlike anything Russia had faced before. But instead of reacting impulsively, Russia adapted. It built alternative financial systems, strengthened partnerships outside the Western sphere, and expanded alliances that could serve as long-term counterweights. And then it identified a single move that could shift the global balance without triggering direct war with NATO. That move was Iran. A heavily armed Iran, especially one equipped with the most advanced nuclear delivery systems in existence, changes the Middle East in a way that forces the United States to divide its attention, resources, and credibility. Every bit of focus redirected toward Iran is attention taken away from Russia. Every ally that begins to question American protection becomes a potential partner for Moscow. This wasn't escalation for the sake of conflict. It was a calculated investment designed to reshape the global order over time, and the execution of that plan was just as methodical. Transporting 1,000 Sarmat missiles required a massive logistical operation, but one that Russia was uniquely capable of carrying out. The missiles were moved by rail across Russian territory to the Caspian Sea, transferred by military vessels across waters largely inaccessible to Western surveillance, and then transported over land into Iran, where pre-built underground facilities were ready to receive them. The entire operation was disguised under the cover of large-scale military exercises, which created normal-looking movement patterns that satellites observed but initially interpreted as routine. By the time analysts realized something didn't match the declared activity, the missiles had already been delivered and secured. This wasn't a failure of technology or intelligence gathering. The data was there, the signals were visible. The failure came from hesitation, from the reluctance to act on incomplete information in a way that could risk direct confrontation with Russia. And that hesitation created a window, a narrow but decisive window, that Russia used perfectly. This is where the difference between political systems becomes critical. Democracies require certainty before taking high-risk actions, while authoritarian systems can act decisively with less confirmation. Russia moved forward. The United States paused to verify, and by the time verification came, it was too late. The missiles were already in place. Meanwhile, Iran wasn't unprepared. For years, Iranian and Russian teams had been working together behind closed doors, building the infrastructure needed to support this exact moment. Underground launch facilities, command systems, trained personnel, all of it was ready before the first missile even crossed the border. So, when the transfer was completed, Iran didn't need months to integrate the system. It needed days. And that is the reality the world is now facing. Now, to understand why this moment is so dangerous, you have to look beyond the transfer itself and focus on the weapon at the center of it all. Because the RS-28 Sarmat isn't just another missile added to an arsenal. It represents a complete shift in how nuclear warfare is understood. NATO didn't casually name it Satan II. That label came from analysts who rarely use dramatic language unless the situation truly demands it. And in this case, it does. The Sarmat changes everything across 5 critical dimensions: payload capacity, warhead configuration, range flexibility, penetration capability, and most importantly, the near impossibility of stopping it once it's launched. Start with payload capacity, often referred to as throw weight. The Sarmat can carry around 10 metric tons of payload. That number might sound technical, but its meaning is straightforward and terrifying. It allows a single missile to carry not just nuclear warheads, but also decoys and advanced countermeasures designed to overwhelm any defense system at the same time. In its standard configuration, each missile carries between 10 and 15 independently targetable warheads, meaning one launch doesn't hit one target, it hits many, simultaneously. Imagine a single missile being able to strike multiple cities, military bases, and strategic infrastructure all at once. That's not a theoretical scenario. That's exactly how this system was designed to operate. One launch could cover an entire country. Now multiply that capability by 1,000. But the real power of the Sarmat isn't just in numbers. It's in flexibility. The warheads it carries can be configured for different purposes, ranging from smaller tactical strikes to massive city-level destruction. This gives the operator a full spectrum of options, from limited military targeting to total devastation. And that flexibility creates a strategic nightmare for any opponent. Because when you're facing a system that can operate anywhere along that spectrum, you're forced to prepare for all of it at once. There's no single defense plan that covers every possibility. Now, add to this the missile's range and flight behavior, which is where the Sarmat truly breaks the existing model of global defense. With a range of 18,000 kilometers, it can reach any point on Earth from Iranian territory. But range alone isn't what makes it revolutionary. It's how it travels. Most missile defense systems were designed based on predictable flight paths, particularly those coming over the North Pole, which has historically been the shortest route between major powers. For decades, the United States and its allies built early warning systems, radar networks, and interceptor placements around that assumption. The Sarmat ignores that assumption completely. It can approach from the South Pole or take unpredictable trajectories that bypass those carefully built systems entirely. That means detection is delayed, reaction time is reduced, and interception becomes exponentially harder. In simple terms, the system was designed not just to be powerful, but to make existing defenses irrelevant. And then there's the penetration capability, which takes this problem to another level. Each Sarmat missile doesn't just carry warheads. It carries decoys that mimic real targets, electronic systems that disrupt tracking, and re-entry vehicles that can maneuver at hypersonic speeds during the final phase of their descent. For any defense system trying to respond, this creates a layered challenge. First, it has to identify which objects are real and which are decoys. Then it has to track targets that are moving unpredictably at extreme speeds. And finally, it has to attempt interception within a very limited window of time. Even under ideal conditions, that's an almost impossible task. And those ideal conditions don't exist in real conflict scenarios. Against a single missile, there's a chance, however small, that some warheads could be intercepted. But against multiple launches, that chance drops rapidly. Against dozens, it disappears entirely. And against 1,000, the concept of missile defense stops being practical. It becomes theoretical. The physics don't support it, the math doesn't support it, and the timing doesn't allow it. Take Israel's Arrow 3 system, for example, one of the most advanced missile defense platforms ever developed. It was designed to intercept long-range threats outside the atmosphere. But even this system has limits, particularly in terms of how many interceptors it can deploy at once. Against a small number of incoming missiles, it can be effective. Against a large-scale attack, it begins to struggle. And against a Sarmat-level threat, with hundreds of warheads and decoys arriving simultaneously, it becomes overwhelmed before it can even begin to engage effectively. The same applies to American systems like THAAD, Aegis, and ground-based interceptors. These systems were built for a different kind of threat environment, one where attacks were limited in scale and more predictable in nature. The Sarmat was specifically engineered to operate outside those assumptions. So when you combine everything together, the payload, the flexibility, the range, the unpredictable trajectories, and the advanced countermeasures, you're left with a system that cannot realistically be stopped once deployed at scale. And this is where the strategic implications become impossible to ignore. Iran now possesses a strike capability that is, for all practical purposes, unlimited in reach and nearly unstoppable in execution. This isn't just about regional power anymore. This is about global impact. For decades, nuclear stability relied on a balance between major powers, where both sides had enough capability to deter each other. That balance created a kind of uneasy stability, but what we're seeing now doesn't fit into that model. This is not a balanced situation. It's an asymmetric one, where a regional actor suddenly holds a level of destructive capability that disrupts the entire framework of deterrence. And that kind of imbalance creates instability, not stability. Because when one side feels overwhelmingly threatened, the pressure to act preemptively increases. And when both sides are operating under that pressure, the margin for error becomes extremely small. Now bring that reality back to Israel's 8-hour ultimatum, because this is where theory turns into immediate decision-making. Those 11 words weren't just a warning. They were a signal of how limited the available options actually are. On the surface, the demand sounds simple: stand down or face consequences. But when you break it down, the meaning becomes much more complicated. Iran cannot physically return these missiles within 48 hours. That's not logistically possible. So the demand isn't about reversing the transfer. It's about changing the status of those missiles, potentially removing them from active readiness or agreeing to some form of limitation. But even that is a massive ask. From Iran's perspective, these missiles represent the most powerful strategic asset it has ever possessed. Giving that up, or even limiting it under pressure, would come at a political cost that no government can easily accept. And Iran's response made that clear almost immediately. Within just 3 hours, Iran issued its answer, not through quiet diplomacy, but through a public statement from its highest leadership. That choice alone sent a message before the words were even analyzed. The response rejected the ultimatum outright, framing Iran's new capabilities as a matter of sovereignty and warning that any attack would trigger a response designed to eliminate the threat at its source. And just like that, the countdown became real. The 8-hour clock is no longer a statement. It's an active timeline. And every major capital in the world is now watching it tick down, knowing that when it reaches zero, the decision that follows could reshape the future in ways no one can fully control. Because here's the reality Israel is facing. If it chooses to act, it must attempt to strike deeply buried, heavily protected missile facilities spread across Iran. That will require a massive operation, sustained air campaigns, precise intelligence, and likely support from the United States. Even then, success is not guaranteed. In fact, it's unlikely. And any missiles that survive that initial strike would almost certainly be launched in retaliation. On the other hand, if Israel does nothing, if the ultimatum expires without action, it sends a signal that its red lines can be pushed, that even under extreme threat, it can be forced to hold back. That weakens deterrence not just now, but in every future crisis. And that's the trap. There is no outcome that preserves Israel's position completely. Every option carries a cost, and every delay increases the pressure. At the same time, Washington's response has added another layer to this situation. The call for de-escalation and dialogue, while expected, was interpreted in a very specific way by those directly involved. It did not endorse Israel's ultimatum. It did not promise immediate military backing, and it did not directly confront Russia over the transfer. In a moment like this, what isn't said can be just as important as what is. And the message that many in the region are taking from this is simple. The United States is not ready to act at the scale this crisis might require, at least not within the time frame that's now in play.